is Roger Green, host of the Surfing the Mash Tsunami podcast. Today, we kick off our 5th season with 6 conversations from episode 1, our update from the co-hosts, and a look at some of the patient treatment challenges we'll face this year, particularly connected to the potential approval of resmetirom. There'll be no vault this week. It will be back next week. This conversation broadens the scope of the discussion somewhat. After a joke from me about considering FibroScan as lie detector, I asked Louise to describe how and how tightly MyLife365.me is integrated with FibroScan. She comments that this depends on country, patient commitment, other factors, goes on to note the value of selling corporate programs to companies that do not realize the impact of MASH, MASH, and related diseases on workforce productivity and presenteeism. I go on to discuss some of the new features coming to podcasts this year. One particularly exciting effort, a question of the week segment we will be adding later in the month of February. From here, the discussion shifts to issues on patient treatment. I start by recalling a concern I emailed Corey raised during our year-end conversations that FIB4 screening will have unintended consequences, at least in the U.S., in demotivating frontline treaters to stay with the program. Jordan Schottenberg acknowledges he's been thinking about this same issue, and that the key lies in broader, deeper professional education. As this conversation winds down, he shares his hope that the prospective approval of resmetirom in 2024 will lead to increased investment in exactly that kind of education. After having January away from the podcast, Jordan, Louise, and I all are happy to be back. This discussion does not go into tremendous depth, but provides a high-level view of how complicated things might get for MASH stakeholders in the year ahead. It's a bit to digest, so just sit back, listen, learn, enjoy. When you're done, join the dialogue on our LinkedIn discussion group. So I'm having a realization as I listen to you that I'm delighted that my wife doesn't know anything about FibroScan because she's a fitness instructor. So she's a diet hawk and she's an exercise hawk and all that stuff. But if I wanted not to reveal to her what I was doing, she wouldn't have the ability to scan my liver and say, it's not quite what you say it is. As you say, the best lie detector you work with.
Louise Campbell.
It is. But if you do fitness and health, actually, I would say assess what we're doing internally, not just externally. I know a lot of people who juice stuff and don't look as good on the inside as they look on the outside.
I guess the only other question I had for you is, I know how tightly integrated you are with the FibroScan machine in the UK, and I understand the way you're operating in Australia. In the other markets where you are, how tightly are you integrated with FibroScans, and how does that work?
All of them are new. We heavily would advise people to now come to us to add liver health and liver awareness onto their corporate health assessments. Remember, liver disease and liver poor health account for the second leading cause of working lives lost, and arguably probably your biggest loss of employment. So we're working on that. We did a corporate screening where some people didn't actually want the blood test. They just wanted their annual FibroScan to see how they were doing. And putting it in a work environment, when we do it, when we go there, people compete. And I think the competitive nature of people saying, well, I can beat you on your score. I'm seeing a lot of people next week who are going, that can't possibly be true. My liver's got to be more healthy than yours, and have done that. This whole thing of making it non-stigmatized, a bit of let's help my diet and lifestyle. So we've added it to corporate packages. So again, if people want that, then we are very much keen to add that to your normal blood tests. It means a lot of blood tests don't calculate FIB4 in corporate packages. So let's have a look. There's things we can do to strengthen. Our workforce is our biggest advantage. And if a third of it is off sick every day, near enough, due to an underlying condition that we're not looking for, but we are assessing them for cardiovascular risks and type 2 diabetes, then we're still missing. But again, it's not where it's normally considered. Liver health is intrinsic to most things, and being liver aware could be part of everybody's improvement. Because as I've said in the video, we wrote it out of the story, both in healthcare and in life. We need to write the liver back into our health journey because it is so much part of nearly everything we do.
Excellent point. And when we get to the second point of part of this episode, where we talk about what we think are interesting major trends in 2024, besides including, but not limited to, what happens if resmetirom gets approved by the U.S. My month's been a lot more prosaic. Basically, I've been dealing with lungs, which you can hear when I cough today, and a leg and an arm and a couple other things, and other family members dealing with various illnesses. But thank goodness it's the end of the month. Everybody's healthy now and back to life. The other thing we've done, obviously, is we've done some transitioning around the podcast. We've looked at a whole new graphic approach and then decided that was probably too much to do at once right now. So we've updated the name. We've decided it's now SurfingMASH.com. We've changed the logo a little bit. The most exciting thing that I think we've decided to do, and we will be rolling this out later in the month, is to insert a new section in the podcast, which we're calling Question of the Week. The idea being that we will be inviting audience members and sponsors and everybody who touches this podcast to send us questions, and we'll be be creating our own. The goal will be to release one question a week and then to see the answers that we get from people. My belief is the focus of question of the week should probably be on practical treatment issues, because where we grow this year, the podcast growth is going to grow in two directions. It's going to grow towards treaters on the clinical care pathway, and it's going to grow towards places where there are more folks on the commercial side or the product side or the treatment side, working in institutions or working. I mean, Madrigal's in the middle of staffing up a whole bunch of people in the U.S., several hundred. They're not the only ones who are doing that. So to have a place where people who are a little bit less experienced can ask questions in the ways that they want to ask them. And then we will every week devote 5 or 10 minutes at the back end of the podcast before we get to the business section, talking about one question and then introducing a new one. We've done some market testing on that. I think it will actually work this time. I'm sure it'll work this time. And I'm excited to invite more listeners to come in more regularly with the podcast. So that's my news for the month. Less exciting than what you guys have been working on. But frankly, getting healthy is really exciting. And I'm not talking about liver aware. I'm talking about lung aware and leg aware and arm aware and all this other stuff. But it's all good now. All right. So with that, let's shift gears a little bit for a while and take a look at some of the issues that we think will be evolving over the year. We asked people a lot about that in our year-end interviews. We got some really fascinating answers. But I want to start in clinical care pathway, not just because Louise mentioned liver aware, but because as we educate the world and the patient world, aligning the changes in patient demand, the changes in protocol, and making it flow smoothly is, I think, intrinsically a challenge. For those who listen, Naeem Alkouri in his end-of-the-year interview shared a concern that if you run FIB4s and send everybody to get scanned, too many people are going to get scanned and then get negatives. And if they get negatives, they're going to go back to primary care, will stop doing the scans. And if they have positive results, at least in the States, hepatology will steal the patient. So I'm wondering, how do we align education of the patient with education of the frontline treaters so that everything moves in lockstep and it doesn't create bad impression, bad taste?
Jörn Schattenberg.
Yeah, that's a very good and challenging question. I've been thinking about this, obviously, with you guys in the podcast here for some time, Roger. Outside of our field, there is still very little knowledge on doing this. And also, we said that a couple of years ago, but we still don't have an approved drug. I think we're very close to it. But many physicians have not thought about screening for high-risk liver disease in their patient population. So I think we're ahead of the wave here a little bit. And by surfing, just to stay with our theme here, by surfing that wave and bringing it out, I think it'll take a lot of time to really reach the broad group of physicians to implement this type of patient referral pathways that we've been discussing. I think we very well established some of the numbers, the pitfalls, the downsides, and the strengths of screening in at-risk populations, but we got to get it out there. And really the big change is going to be the approved drug coming available. And I think that will open up colleagues listening to the offers and the thoughts and ideas we're having, and that will make a big difference. And it's going to happen this year. So I think it's good we know how to propose it.
And now, back to Roger.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions or comments about the content of this conversation or the entire episode, please put them in the review section of the page from which you downloaded the conversation, or send an email to questions@surfingmash.com. We'll be back next week with a stakeholder-centric look at the issues of 2024. Until then, stay safe, surf on. We'll see you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.